What up, YouTube? Webhead Mike here, and if you're a D&D player or any other type of role-playing game player, you need not fear the Reaper. Ah yes, death in D&D came up about a week ago, and thought about it's time I weighed in on this too. Now, there can be no joy without strife. There can be no hope without despair. There can be no ecstasy without agony. If you're going out on an adventure and there's weapons involved, bodily harm is certainly to be expected. Maiming could happen, certainly death, but there's also the riches that lie beyond and yonder. Think about, perhaps, if you want to make an NPC in your story who is crippled, and he has the story about the way he got crippled was because he was a part of an adventuring group that tried to stop a dragon from destroying their town. He fended it off, but he got caught in its mouth while he kept on going at it. And then eventually the dragon retreated and dropped him on his spine, sadly. And while a cleric could get to him and recover a lot, they weren't skilled enough to mend his broken spine. So now so now he's a barkeep shuffling about and serving drinks and serving his stories. Well, that's a really cool thing. However, they would also probably say, hey, how dare you show someone handicapped in this situation? Well, limitations of the technology of the time would certainly apply to that. Maybe, at some point, they might be able to find some cleric that could restore their broken spine to its previous state, but doesn't he have a cool story to go along with that injury? And as far as death goes in this game, it should be a natural occurrence. As Gandalf said in Lord of the Rings, it's just another path, one that we all must take. And in this talk about death, it is actually really hard to die in 5e, to the point where if you actually want to have any lethality to it, you almost have to be unafraid to be a little bit more harsher, have some more realistic rules. Now, of course, this is a problem with some players who might make a character that really isn't a character, it's just an extension of themselves, in which case role-playing with them is already hard enough. But the idea that you're harming their player, well, now you're harming them. So that's something they have to develop and get over, because the character is not you. The player is inhabiting the mind of someone other than them. Now, of course, there's all kinds of ways to do this. I know in one of the sessions I just did in my game, a player character failed two death saves because an enemy dropped them in one hit and they had one other attack available, so they just hit them while they were down, causing 2 failed death saves. And granted, the character does have a trait that gives them advantage on death saving throws, but they are still 1 fail save away from death. So the players still scrambled to make sure that he could be, recovered with a healing word, get back in the fight, so he can do a second wind and get himself back up and engaged. But again, that caused some stress that would be natural in the situation. You have to be unafraid of being a little bit harsh, because nothing in this game can hurt you or any of the players. All it's going to do is give you a cool story, bruh. That's all you have to think about. That's all you have to worry about. And another thing is that you want to make sure your players stay engaged, because if there's no threat of death, what's the point of all this? But then on the other end of the spectrum, there's one former friend of mine who, when I was in a Strixhaven game, now this is the same guy who's also on Twitter saying about how, oh, you have to be sure you're being careful with your players and treat death responsibly. This is the same guy who just threw my character, literally because of a kraken was attacking, into water that was infested with sharks that it was controlling. Now, of course, I'm quite fine with that in concept. I'm being thrown into a hazard. And sure, there are a number of sharks that would be attracted to me being in there, especially if I was damaged and bloody. But 10 attacking me? That seemed a bit high. Especially considering when you look at how sharks would attack in like a group, not all of them attack in a team. It's more like there's a pecking order and they would go one at a time. So maybe if I heard 5, I wouldn't have raised an eyebrow, but hearing 10 made me wonder, are you just trying to kill me? And then another case where I thought this guy was trying to kill me was there was a sword effect that when I was hit by it, it caused a Wail of the Banshee effect. So I had to go and make a saving throw. I made it, but then he invoked a power of that same weapon that said, you fail a saving throw, and now you're dropped to 0 hit points. Oh, and by the way, this character can still keep attacking you, but maybe it won't. I don't know. You're down, and now you have to start making death saving throws. Again, I just look at that and go, why did you even have me roll against the Wail of the Banshee? Isn't it enough that you're also having this sword effect that can just keep causing hazards all around, and the player and the NPC can still keep attacking? I don't know, but that's a case where the DM needs to understand the lethality of what they are bringing and understanding what is lethal to their players. Now, at that point, I was a bard, pretty easy to hit. So you didn't really need a Wail of the Banshee to drop me down to 0 hit points. You could just keep attacking me, which really isn't that hard. He didn't have that good of an AC. But yeah, so when you're DMing, GMing, directing, whatever you want to call for whatever game you're running, you always want to make sure that people know serious bodily harm, maiming, and death are possibilities, and have rules in place for that. DM Bloodworth has ideas for beyond what System Shock could be, such as you would start having penalties to your Constitution score that would also affect your recovery rate and how long it would take to get them back. Like maybe it would take 6 weeks to get back your con score to what it was. All these are really cool ideas. One I'm just going to throw out there is, from inspiration of System Shock, if you take half or more of your max hit points in one attack, you should have to make a con saving throw, and if you fail, you could drop to 0 hit points, die outright, gain a level of exhaustion, or just be fine because you rolled that well. And, you know, the tail end of it being, of course, the insta-death. Then there's the drop to 0 and then make death saving throws. There's a level of exhaustion, and then there's just fine, which would be enough to cause a death spiral effect, which a lot of people would complain, oh, this is going to make it harder and harder. Yeah, just like how it would be if you were dying and if you don't get help. But that's a point where you're a part of a unit. Other players are there to help you. You're there to help them. But that's just my thoughts. I've rambled on for 8.5 minutes. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Wizard of the Coast and its lackeys being far too sensitive about death in D&D and they shouldn't fear the Reaper? Or am I being a little bit too harsh? Until next time, Webhead Mike, out.